Hello, my name is Jaylen Evans.
I'm Fischmann.
I'm Justin Rizzi.
I'm Vanessa Handy.
And we were all part of a focus group a while back about race in the classroom, and we decided to pursue it further.
We decided that we wanted to get multiple perspectives on this issue, and so we decided to make this video.
So we went around to different people in different communities and we listened to them discuss the topic, and we compiled their ideas and put it together into this film.
And we want to give a huge thanks to all of the people who participated in these interviews for helping us, and we hope you like our documentary.
Bye!
My name is Kelly Brown.
Kanika Chopra.
Carlo Castro.
My name is Charlotte Moore.
Colleen Gallagher.
Jaylen Evans.
Quincy Shane.
It's Nadia Johnson.
I'm Brady Smith. I'm also a senior here at Westwood High School.
My name is Noelle Baxter, and I am the K-12 Social Studies Supervisor for the Scotch Plains-Skyline School District.
I am a senior here at Westwood High School.
I'm a lead teacher of the kindergarten class.
12th grade.
And I am a Social Studies teacher here at Scotch Plains-Skyline High School.
And I'm a social studies teacher here at Scotch Plains-Skyline High School.
And I teach sophomore American literature and senior AP literature and composition.
I go to Scotch Plains-Skyline High School.
I work at North Star Academy.
I teach U.S. History 1 to freshmen, and I teach an elective called Psychology for 10th through 12th graders.
Go to West Orange High School.
I am a first grade teacher, Lincoln Park Elementary School.
I'm a senior, 12th grade.
Been an elementary school teacher for almost, 20 years.
How did your own education shape the way you teach race, inclusion, literature, history, etc.?
I'm laughing because I was born and raised in the South, in Georgia, in white, middle class, like suburban, way north of Atlanta schools.
In the suburbs for the majority from second to high school, so that's in 12th grade, and the suburbs of South Brunswick. So it was kind of diverse, but mostly still predominantly white.
I also really tried hard not to perpetuate that ignorant stereotype while at some time acknowledging that stereotype is based in reality, and that Stone Mountain still exists south of Atlanta. It's this gigantic granite monument with the heroes of the Confederacy on it, and folks still go every summer and sit on the lawn of Stone Mountain, and they have a great laser show, and they play Dixie, and people hoot and holler and yell, "The South will rise again." But looking back as an adult, oh my God, yeah, it was an all-white crowd. If you were descended from individuals for whom this is a horror show, why would you go wave an American? Like, it just is this unbelievable paradigm shift, which my family is all still in the South. I find myself going back and visiting them and having very diverging opinions on like how we talk and what we talk about and our perspectives about, the politics of naming and just, the modern political landscape. It's fraught.
I don't know if it's my education from elementary school or just my education from college. I was a history major, and so a lot of the things that I happened to be interested in were things that I didn't learn when I was in high school.
I didn't really get exposed to this tougher stuff until I got to college, and I majored in history. I would say it was toward the end, in my upper level classes, that I really started to become exposed and had professors that were in the South, who were white, who were very interested in talking about a lot of the really sordid racial past of the South.
I grew up very lucky, I guess, and fortunate, but also very privileged, right, as a white female. So I went to schools where there was really a homogeneous population my whole life, and it wasn't until I went to college that I stepped out of that bubble that I was in.
It's the first time I saw Eyes on the Prize. It's the first time I ever heard about Emmett Till. It's about the first time I ever saw Emmett Till, yeah.
I actually didn't learn about African American history until I went to college, and I took an African American studies class, like an Americana class or something like that. It wasn't until college where I felt like it was important for me to know more about my history, maybe because I was older, like I was a young adult. But growing up, no, because I never really felt racism. I never felt any of that.
I kind of think that education as a college student is more like what informs what kinds of things I include in the classroom. And then I just think it's nice to see yourself in the stuff that you're working on in a classroom. So as my kids have changed and I've tried to connect with their different experiences. I try to just bring in things that would be like the little carrot to them. So depending upon what kind of kids are in front of me, that might be the book that I choose, or the, you know, the special that I choose, or the documentary, or I don't know. It just depends.
I feel like that is really when I recognize the importance of getting to know people who are different from you.
I think I wish I saw more of myself when I was in school, but not at the time. But in retrospect, I think about how interesting that would have been, and I think I try to do that now.
It's also not fun to look back on your past. And I try to convey to my students that sense of like, I feel bad about an idea that I had, that sort of like embarrassment and cringing and guilt. Sitting with that is the most important thing that I feel like I can do. I need to not excuse it away. I need to not get rid of it. I think it's the idea that always understanding that sitting with that and not fixing it then, trying to fix it now is important. Like that is the most, I think, important idea for especially well-meaning educators that come from a background of privilege, is to use that as fuel to like try to do the right thing. And then sometimes also recognize when you mess up and be like, I'm really sorry, and not excuse it.
A large portion of our research was teaching the concept of hard history. Hard history is the idea of teaching uncomfortable topics from multiple perspectives.
We don't wrestle with some of the issues as deeply as we should or as often as we should. I think a lot of that is because it's hard. So I think that we have tried to look at places where we should be talking about some of these difficult issues in a more significant manner. And you know, over time, I think we're working on both strategies and also conceptually, why are you teaching this to students? What do you want them to get out of it? So I think the work that we do on both really thinking about our classrooms as places where everyone feels safe, which doesn't mean everyone can advocate for any belief that they want to, because some beliefs that you advocate for will make other people feel not safe, but also being really clear about our purpose about teaching things and putting it in a context so that it is an academic pursuit, knowing that it is still very emotional and can be really hard for students to deal with. Our teachers, I think, teach the hard history in a way that is accessible and fair for everybody. We spent a lot of time, as you can probably imagine, leading up to the last presidential election and in the aftermath, really talking about what are the ways that we can teach these things in a very divisive environment, and what are the strategies that we use to make sure students feel comfortable.
We have a really supportive supervisor in Ms. Baxter and also in Dr. Heisey, and so they make it easy for me to teach about hard topics because they actually encourage it. We've had multiple workshops on one thing that Ms. Baxter is really focused on in recent years is increasing empathy among our curriculum. That's been one of our department goals in recent years, is to infuse perspective taking and empathy into the curriculum, and so having that as a goal has been awesome, to say the least, because it's something that I personally believe should be part of every curriculum, and having the support of a supervisor and building principal in that path has been definitely awesome to have as well.
Especially in the last 7 or 8 years, like this has become inclusiveness in teaching and teaching hard history responsibly in teaching the literature has become sort of like a framing racial detriment in teaching, and like bringing in previously marginalized voices and not just having that sort of monolithic historical narratives. In teaching responsibly this history, I think it's really important to teach like a non-whitewashed version, and when you teach accurate history, you're going to teach hard history if you do it well. When you're teaching about the narrative of history predominantly has been written by the victors, what stories have we lost in skipping over those?
There are ways to do hard history, as I recall, to do hard histories in a way that gives truth to it, and can work with the kids.
When I'm in general history, it's like, okay, take the notes, move on with your day, because you're taking the notes, you're worried about quizzes and tests that you don't go into the depth with it.
For that, I was in just regular history, and it was just very like textbook based. There was no conversation to like add input or opinion on anything like that. I think that really hindered the ability of the class to kind of just like feel open and like more educational than it obviously was. It was just kind of a memorization like type of thing, instead of like I'm gaining like a social awareness from this.
The questions are usually, is this going to be on the test? We need to remember this for the test. It's never why did that happen, or why are we just not learning this? It's
like I don't think they really realized like the gravity that racism, the intense way that racism plays a role in modern day America. Like I think they're like, oh, like we let you like sit at the lunch counter or whatever, and then I don't think they realize that it's like it's not just somebody yelling like a slur at you, it's not somebody threatening to hurt you because you're XYZ, it's somebody, you know, pushing a cart in front of you and not letting you go. It's just like small things like that. And like honestly though, like if you think about it, like white people like created racism, like that was created by them, so you have to fix that problem. Like I can't mop up the mess that you made. I can give you the mop, but I can't mop that mess up for you. You made the mess.
Through our interviews, we noticed that some teachers expressed a lack of varying viewpoints on the topics they were taught in high school. We were wondering if diversity in staff has an effect on teachers and students in education.
I know students come to me, I think they feel comfortable coming to me and they've expressed their concerns that they don't think that we have a very diverse staff, right?
Where I first started my teaching career, we were also not a diverse teaching staff. And you know, as someone who hires people and does interviews, we go to job fairs, part of our challenge, and this is like me making up an excuse now, is that the pool of candidates is not very diverse.
To an extent, I don't think we have a racially diverse staff, obviously, but I do think in other ways we have some diversity in the school among our staff members.
We have some diversity in terms of people might have come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So some people are the first people in their family to graduate from college. They might be the first person in their family to work in a white-collar professional job as opposed to manual labor.
One thing that I think plays a role is just the area in which we live, right? So we attract people within the vicinity, right?
They are interested in teaching in a more diverse place. And this place is pretty diverse, again, compared to some school districts in New Jersey are pretty diverse. But it's really hard to find candidates that would add to the diversity of our staff.
And looking at the statistics regarding ethnicity and race in the Scotch Plains area is predominantly white, right? And so I think that is one issue. I think in recent years, administrators have been trying to find ways to kind of recruit, I guess, or attract more diverse staff members. And I know they are trying. I know that's a fact that they are trying.
And I go to look at resumes and interview. I mean, to find someone, what I look for are people who have an interest in diversity and maybe experiences where maybe they've done things that would bring a new perspective. But otherwise, until I invite someone in to do an interview, I don't really know their personal stories or where they're from or what they've been through. We've tried to come up with ideas for how to recruit a more diverse staff, but I think it's a real problem.
I'm not really sure from their end why we're not getting more diverse staff, but I do think it's important for students to see people in front of the classroom that are like them, right, in some regards.
I don't know if I were a person of color. I don't think that would be different. I don't.
The community that the kids come from and what they're used to, like where they live and what they're used to is other people of color. And so when they see teachers of color, teachers that look like them, they can relate more. I feel like it's a different dynamic, it's a different relationship.
Working at a school that's predominantly black and brown children, you automatically have this connection because I'm a black teacher.
Because especially when you think about code switching, where there's a certain way that they talk to their friends and then they know that they have to keep it professional in school, but even teachers can do it with them. They can do that code switch.
It's I don't know how to explain it. You just feel like when you are teaching, you're not teaching in a way where it's you're singling someone out because they're a black child. They know that I love them because of who they are and not what they look like, because we all look like that.
They feel like there's a different connection there. You understand better where I come from and what my culture is like.
Our school is so white. It's painful.
I don't think about it.
Now that I am thinking about it, I believe I only have one black teacher, or two.
I really have to think about this.
Our one teacher, Farag, he's Egyptian, so he's been I guess a person of color in America, so he knows kind of what's happening. So yeah, so his parents were immigrants, so he's I don't know.
like first generation or whatever. And then our other teacher is half Puerto Rican, but everybody thinks she's like white, but she still has like that heritage. So they both have like, I don't know, just kind of like that person of color background to kind of like introduce to the class.
Recently, they just hired a lot of female Caucasian teachers, and they have a picture on our school website. There's 3 Caucasian men, and everyone else, there's like 20 white females. Even if they're not diverse, our teachers are still aware.
Yes, they're very aware.
And very respectful as well.
And I think it is really hard for us to then sit and talk about, what are the best ways to really address concepts of racism throughout American history and in our curriculum. We have to, really think about the ideas that we have are going to be limited by our own experience. And I think that as people are talking about, what they're teaching and how they're teaching it, if we could have a more diverse staff, I think it would enhance those conversations and it would get us to think more deeply about things.
In your history classes, do you ever do anything for Black history?
So I go back and forth with this because there are some people who say, well, why should there just be 1 month of it, right?
Dude, because it's like, and then some people, oh my gosh, that aggravating comment that's like, oh, why do they need the whole month?
Oh yeah, oh my god.
What? I can't even have the whole month that I have. Like,
They're like, why do we just celebrate this?
like stuff like that. Like anything that's like appreciating someone else, they're like, why do you need this?
From my perspective, yes, I think it's important to honor and respect African Americans all throughout the year in history.
Other, specifically, like Caucasians are celebrated throughout the year. And then it's like, oh, we'll give you this month. Even though there's like 11 others, we'll give you this 1 month. And it's like, why can't we get the whole year either? And it's the shortest month of the whole year.
That's what I always say.
So we're not finished talking about it, but as soon as the new month starts, we're done talking about it.
I don't think it's something that should just be highlighted 1 month and then say like the next month, all right, now back to teaching about white people, right?
It's always been that way. It's February. Okay, so today we're learning about slavery every year.
And then like afterwards,
every year.
I see the need for a Black History Month, but I think as a history teacher, it's something we should be infusing into the curriculum throughout every single month. But I think I personally, as a teacher, could do a better job, I guess, of highlighting it.
I think there was something on the announcements every day.
Do you have facts read over the
Yeah, I
announcement
think they would read like a fun fact or like talk about like a successful African American person over the announcement.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Like a quote or
they'll
something.
announce it that it's like it's Black History.
We had the assembly?
Yes, we did have the assembly. Coincidentally went to, what's it called?
Oh, we went to African American history?
Yeah, I think that was a coincidence that happened to be Black History Month.
Yeah, the students will like get a guest speaker, and the step team, boys and girls step team, will perform dances, songs, and like spirituals. It's actually really beautiful.
Yeah, we have diversity night now where you like come perform like a cultural thing.
That's a good time. The food's
I like
so good.
You went? I didn't go. It was fun.
It's so good. Like the food's so good.
This is very new though. This is like maybe sophomore year. I'm excited.
And it's always busy because there's always extra credit involved.
It's always a good experience because it really grounds you.
I think it gets the people out that like want to be there, I guess, and actually feel included there.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think it's probably good for those who feel like they've been left out as opposed to those who've just been kind of like blending and content to blend their whole time in high school.
Like when you're younger, like how were certain topics approached, like possibly difficult topics approached? Like were your teachers just like kind of like skipped over it, kind of?
I think it was sugar-coated and I think a lot of stuff was not taught as well. So I think it was a combination of both.
Growing up, when we used to learn about Native American, we used to dress like Native Americans when we were younger and like jump around and, act all weird. But it was just for Thanksgiving. We were like, yay, food, and we get to dress up like Native Americans, but we were never taught what happened.
You peel back the layers of everything and you see the truth. And it wasn't just having a feast. There was things after that caused like the massacre of an entire people.
We never really told anything growing up, and then like I think it was maybe I think it was like high school that they started to tell us that everything wasn't really the way that we thought it was.
I think in high school you're allowed to be more opinionated. I feel like when you were younger you were like taught the topics, but you're like, that's it.
That was always the awkward part, like holidays, like Columbus Day. It's like you used to celebrate it in school.
Get the day off.
Yeah.
Someone told me Columbus wasn't a good person. I was like, like what?
Yeah, and like all the Lincoln stuff, like there's a lot with him and everything like that.
Like you were told that he was like this hero and he was like this person that like he was so amazing, right? He saved us.
In 1492, sailed the ocean blue.
Like maybe don't celebrate like Columbus Day or let us do certain things. Like
I wish they just taught straight, because like as a kid your brain is literally so moldable, like that really like sets you up for who you're going to be in the future, for obvious reasons. But like if you think about it, if I had gone home and known that like freaking Columbus was like a mass murderer, like I would have been like, oh my god.
But then you can realize why no one told you, because you were so young and you were so like naive to everything.
You can like introduce it in like a nice way, like a nicer way though, like
or like make good out of a bad situation.
Did in historical events like slavery or the genocide of Native Americans, or the Holocaust even.
Like massacres and people being slaughtered for no reason.
And as a kid, it's like, how do you explain like mass murder, like slavery or anything like that?
To a child that's, in my opinion, like younger than 5th grade. So I try to guide teachers in thinking about what can you realistically expect kids to understand, but then also building on what is our purpose.
In first realizing, okay, I need to teach the history, and before I teach these novels, I needed to first begin to educate myself on how to teach history. On history, and a lot of digging into American history is like, oh wait, I knew that the founding fathers, some of them might have owned slaves. That's a very different realization than, in my understanding, all but 4 of them owned slaves. That's a different perspective when you're like, wait, all of these guys? Like, pretty much all of them? So all of them starts to frame our historical conversation.
We're really trying to root kids in that idea that, diversity is a beautiful thing, that even though we're different, we still have a lot in common with all humans. Like everybody wants to be loved and respected regardless of where they live or how they grow up.
When you talk about marginalized groups, you want to empower kids today and create empathy in kids today. And if we just focus on victimization, we're not fostering empathy. We're not fostering, right? Which I think the most important thing that we teach is like a way to connect to other people and have empathy.
A lot of teachers don't want the real truth to be exposed because sometimes it may be too gruesome or graphic or brutal and things like that.
Any kind of like discussion of slavery, I'm always sensitive to the way I present the information, because I'm always fearful that in the past when they've had that topic presented to them, that it hasn't been presented softly. Because I think a lot of times when you discuss slavery, it's always the downtrodden people and the true harshness of it, which there is harshness in it, but there are other parts to it that you can have a discussion about. Like we did a thing on Harriet Tubman.
She was a Union spy master, and she led this like raid into Confederate territory and freed in one night 700 slaves. Like, that's amazing.
You have a discussion about people who had horrible lives or experienced horrible things, but were able to escape. What happened to people who were able to escape? Well, there are all parts of the country that they escaped to and started towns, or they went to Canada and they lived a whole other life. So it's not just that one little piece of the story where someone was enslaved and they stayed in slavery. Not that that's not some of people's stories, but there are other stories from that.
The little stories of resistance and resilience.
A common thread that we found between all the people we interviewed is that stories were very important in getting different perspectives. So we decided to examine how literature plays a role in the classroom.
These books are so descriptive, and like you can feel the way other people live and how they like react to situations and what they do, like as their lifestyle. And it's so different. It's so different from like the textbooks, because they're not just saying this happened this year, what this person in this movement. It's like you can read about how people felt and how people held restraint against certain things and how people, I don't know. It's different. It's definitely different.
I'm not a language arts teacher, but I'm like fortunate enough to be able to. I have a background in language arts, so I know a lot of books and things like that that have to do with diverse cultures. And a couple years ago, when I did teach it, we had to buy a set of mentor texts that the language arts teacher had to use to sort of introduce lessons, and I made sure that they were diverse kind of books that had to be used.
We just happened to get lucky with the class run. Everybody else was reading the regular books, and just because we're in like a weird
Right,
scenario.
you're in a special class.
Yeah.
So you think your peers don't get the same?
No.
No, they're reading
all.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, they're reading
more
older
Shakespeare. And some other white dude that's probably dead. Yeah.
This is like purely taught in like social studies courses, like sometimes like English, but mainly history. Ms. Keller did a very good job at incorporating 12 Years a Slave into our curriculum, and she also incorporated Native Son, which was a good one too.
I intentionally set up the framework of 12 Years a Slave goes into one of our, we talk about in one of our units, and we do a lot of sort of historical slave narratives in the background and things like that. And we talk about John Punch, and we talk about Elizabeth Key and Fernando, and sort of like when slavery was invented in the United States.
We would like graphic novels
That
and
was
stuff
so
like that.
interesting freshman year though, because everybody was reading like, what was it?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Killing Mockingbird, which is
I think that's
sure it's a white writer.
Our Rapunzel book. It's not the Rapunzel with a white princess. Rapunzel is actually based in Africa in the book. So it's just choosing books that are also culturally relevant for our kids. A lot of our books have Black children in them.
Then we read Persepolis, which was written by Marjane Satrapi.
Like, I'm thinking about the biographies that we read, and they'll touch on different races. So we'll read about Barack Obama or Sonia Sotomayor, who's from the Bronx and she's Hispanic. We read about Garrett Morgan, and so it's not like even in core they learned about the Harlem Renaissance.
There's that lesson that I structure, like Kindred is a whole unit, where I'm like, okay, we're gonna be talking about Octavia Butler, we're gonna be talking about like the existence of Black women, voices of Black women, how the character in Kindred finds herself sort of spontaneously transported back on an antebellum plantation, which is a woman of color in the 1970s. She's like, you know, trying to find her grounding. When I've constructed a framework of a lesson, where I have an idea and spontaneous conversations within that come up.
We get the book and then she has to tell us so we understand, because in the book I read, it's called Everything I Never Told You, she had to point out how they were making race comments about their eyes and their hair. And another one we read about someone growing up in a village, and she had to point out that it was different, and we were like, oh, we didn't even think about that, we were just reading.
Like we're talking about Dana's womanhood, and last year in particular we were talking about Dana, and there's a comment that one of the characters makes about, I thought you were a man because you have on pants and short hair. And that led into last year my scholars were talking, my AP scholars were talking about, they started, two African American women in the class started talking about like hair. They were like, oh, I thought about the hair. And the other classmates were like, I didn't even think about the hair. And they were like, well, I mean, I'm a Black woman and I'm thinking about my hair and I'm thinking about Dana's hair. So they stepped up in that lesson and talked about African American women's hairstyles and how for certain segments of groups their hair is political and their hair is speech.
All of our research led back to the concept of race in the classroom. So here is a look at our discoveries on that topic.
So I had a little documentary about a girl in Nicaragua who was given a video camera, and she documented how the coffee plantation or coffee farm that she and her family had been working for years, how it was impacted by the changing climate and how there was a fungus growing. So I really liked this documentary because it was all in Spanish, so the kids had to read subtitles in English for the first time all the way through. And it was a wonderful 30-minute documentary, great discussion, great science. So I shared with Jaylen, the wrap-up to it was our discussion about the documentary and the coffee and how the kids felt about watching the documentary. And every time I would ask a kid a question, a kid would say, yeah, you know, the girl from Mexico, you know, and the first time I would say, no, remember, she's from Nicaragua. have another part of a conversation and the person would say, oh yeah, you know, the girl from Mexico. And a couple other kids and myself would say, no, she's from Nicaragua. And after a while, the kid kept saying that she was from Mexico. And at the end of it, all the other kids were like, no, Nicaragua. And it just sort of made me pause and stop and think it was a funny moment in school. But because kids are fed, anyone who speaks Spanish must be from Mexico.
But that's just a given. I'm always Mexican until proven otherwise. My brother got called El Chapo's son once. That was fun. Others, like landscaping jokes, are a good one. It just happens often. And it's like usually by people who are like not trying to exactly be aggressive or anything. It slips out and then you're just like,
It just made me think about how our kids only see one group of people as A or B depending upon what they're exposed to. But that just was something that stuck out to me because clearly we were talking about one country and the only other country that person could associate with was Mexico. So I'm sure there are small little things, but that kind of is something that like sticks out as kind of amazing.
In our classroom, my co-teacher and I, we have pictures of inspirational people of color. So we have the Obama family, we have Chance the Rapper, we have Beyonce, the Carter family in our classroom, like just blown up all around the classroom. We have a picture of Spike Lee. And just so that I think it's important for them to see these images and know that it's possible if you work hard. Like you can be this person. You can be like this person. Maybe one day your picture can get blown up also because you made a difference or you made a change. I really think it's better for children to be in a diverse school because it gives them an opportunity and it gives them exposure to other cultures without boarding a plane.
Because we were always surrounded by different cultures, we grew to love them. And we grew this appreciation for other people and how other people react to certain situations or how they talk to people. So I feel like that added to our learning experience and made our minds open up. Like they gave us different perspectives on different things.
I think it's hard to be exposed to a different culture or a different race or religion for the first time as an adult or with your first job. And you're like, oh, why do they do that? Or why do they have this on their forehead? Why do they have, you know what I mean? Like, so I honestly think that it's better to be in a more diverse community growing up in school than it is to be with people that look just like you.
But it really sucks having to represent an entire group of people like all the time. It's like really hard though, because like you want to be like, you want to like have all your friends and everything like that, but you don't want them to think that you're like that kid, you know? But like you don't, you're like, oh my god, you guys are saying the most horrific things.
You
right
want to be
now.
like seen as overly sensitive.
For example, the topic of slavery. So if you're in a predominantly white school, you don't really get the viewpoint of someone who is African American.
There is like one person, she's African American that goes to a school, which is obviously like such a small percentage in our school.
I'm usually probably the only white kid in classes, or like there's two others, it's very low number.
And she's always like, yeah, like when we get to the topic of slavery in class, everybody just looks at me.
But for us, we were always surrounded by different cultures. So anytime there was, like we had a history lesson about something, there was always someone from that background. And to open our eyes and give us new perspectives, which made us appreciate everything else.
That like I know there's classes that go on in my school, predominantly history classes, which would probably be the most important, that don't have any kids of color. So when you get to units like that, there's nobody to be like, oh my god, this affects me today in XYZ ways. Like, I do like a lot of outside research on like the ways in which like Jim Crow and all this stuff has impacted like the Black community today. So I can go in and like kind of positively inform people in a different way that maybe they've been informed in the past. And it's like the only reason I know I can do that is because I've done outside work that hasn't been taught to me in school.
We watched a video on this class, and it was like with little kids, and they were like different shade range of like different children who had different shades of color, and they were like, who's a good child? They like kept pointing to the white one, like even people who were not white. And like, I don't know, like I guess like they asked like the children, they were like why are they like the bad child? Like because they're darker. And I guess growing up in such a diverse town, like, you don't really have to teach your child not to be racist, I guess.
And what I like about this class is like it always opens up as like, what do you feel we need to talk about? And like using that, we branch off into other things like domestic violence, like racism, like sexism, and we use that as like our major topic of the day.
One of my students, who actually two, one from last year, who would, when she got home, she would pretend to be like Josephine Baker and dress up, and mom would send videos of that. And then another student, very similar this year, she would tell me all the time, her mom would tell me, oh my goodness, she just loves the Harlem Renaissance. That's all she talks about when she gets home. And she can name like 5 people. She can tell you about Langston Hughes. She can tell you about Josephine Baker. She can tell you about Louis Armstrong. Like she just really loved that and embodied that. So when at home she's talking about it, so that tells me that she does take it she takes that information with her like beyond school.
In any other setting outside of this classroom, no one will listen to you because you're just you're a girl in high school. Yep. But in this class, your opinion means something, and other people will hear you because they're listening to you speak about what you need to.
And I would like to get more direct input from students in terms of what their experience is like. So I would love to do surveys and focus groups and get feedback. We haven't formally collected anything like that recently, but I think we probably should.
You recognize that it is your responsibility to still be the student at so many points along the way, and not expect them to lead. But when someone steps to the forefront and speaks from their experience, the best thing that you can do is put yourself in the student's position then, and just listen and appreciate and ask questions while still trying to maintain an awareness of how is my question going to come across.
Thank you so much for watching our documentary. We wanted to take the time to personally thank everybody who participated in the interviews. I wanted to thank Danica Silencios and Quincy Shank from North Star Academy in New Brunswick, and also Giancarlo Castro from Scotch Plains Family High School.
I'd like to thank Jaylen Evans from Vanderveer from Somerville Elementary School, and I would also like to thank 3 girls from West Orange High School, Kaya Jones, Nadia Johnson, and Samantha Hess.
I'd like to thank Brady Smith and Charlotte Moore from Westfield High School, and also Kelly Brock from Scotch Plains Family High School.
And I would like to thank 3 more teachers at Scotch Plains Family High School, Ms. Noelle Baxter, Ms. Megan Whitesides, and Ms. Colleen Gallagher.
Thank you so much! Oh, and thank you to our mentor, Ms. Kanika Chopra.
Of course, without her we wouldn't be here.
Yes. Thank you so much!
So I'm walking around Colonia Williamsburg. I was looking for one of the African American exhibits, one of the slave exhibits, and I couldn't find it. But I went into one of the things on the main street there, and there was the woman, the historical reenactor, the African American woman that I'd seen earlier in the day. I was like, do you have a minute? Like, can I ask you a question? Because you're supposed to ask them questions, right? They're in character. And this woman did me the great honor and privilege of like talking to me for an hour. She was a historian, she was an educator. That person took time out of her day to do for me what I hope to maybe take a tiny bit of to be able to do with my students. I was like a bigger, sort of like educator to educator conversation at that point. And she was like, you have to just like help those plants grow, and those seeds that come from those plants, you don't know where they're gonna go. So sometimes we, with our students, don't know where those seeds go. And sometimes we just get feedback from a student that's like, I hadn't thought about that. But that seed might germinate into, later they maybe take an anthropology class or a social anthropology or an African American studies class, or they have a relationship with someone later in a friendship that they take just a moment, maybe it's just for that moment, where they take a moment and pause before they ask a question, or when checked about one of their biases go, okay, you're right, rather than pushing against it. So it's almost like in teaching, we have these conversations and we're planting seeds, and we just have to have the faith that like these young minds will go on and do amazing things. And sometimes we see it, sometimes we see the moment, and we think, oh, that's the moment I love. And sometimes you just have to have like the faith in humanity that when you help plant these seeds, and if we do it well enough, we spark conversations. And like I said, sometimes you see the moment, sometimes I just go back to what that teacher was saying, and I wish I could remember her name, that she just said you just plant the seeds and you just have to hope that they grow.